Good afternoon. Good to see you. One moment, please. Hello, Boris. Hello, Amy. All righty. We have a chavruta today. Chavruta when we have a small group of people studying together. I hope everybody's doing well. Oh, we got Scott in the house. Scott, how are you? It's been a while.
Oh, he's on the phone.
I don't know. We got Wendy joining. Okay. So we have an exciting Torah portion this week, as it is every week, an exciting Torah portion, because the most important and exciting day on the Jewish calendar, you know what it is? Anybody know what the most important day is?
Um, in, in,
What's the most important day? Anybody want to guess? It's not Yom Kippur.
Passover.
It's not Passover either.
All days are important, right?
All days are important. Amy, you're learning with my friend Rabbi Zash? Why, you live near there?
Yeah, yeah,
Amazing. He's the best.
yeah.
He's a dear friend of mine.
Muted. Sorry about that. Yes, yes. And I saw that you guys were on Facebook. So yes, he's very good. I can see you guys are friends.
Yeah, oh yeah, we're good friends. He's a good guy. Good man. So the most important day on the Jewish calendar is today. We always have to have that mindset. So the most important Torah portion is this week's Torah portion. And obviously that comes with excitement and important things as well, because you know, you gotta live in the moment, you gotta live in with the time. So the Torah portion of Shemini, if you're in the Blue Arts Scroll Chumash, on page 588, it starts off as a continuation to last week and the weeks beforehand. So let's all go zoom back 3,336 years ago. Pretend that we're all in the desert, and as we're traveling in the desert, we just built our tabernacle. We collected our tabernacle for a very long time. We collected all of our materials for the tabernacle. It was a whole drama, but we built everything very nicely. Moses built the menorah. God showed him how. We built the altars and we built everything. We have this Mishkan, this movable tabernacle. Okay, now that we have the tabernacle, at the end of the book of Exodus, we finished building it. Comes the book of Leviticus, and now it's time to use it. Time to use the holy temple. Time to use the tabernacle. It's time to start bringing the offerings. And in the Torah portion of Vayikra, I went through all the different kinds of offerings that are going to be brought. And in Sav last week as well, it continued through the laws of purity, impurity, and how to bring sacrifices on daily basis. And then comes along this Torah portion, Shemini, or I should say the end of last week's Torah portion, and they had a 7-day period where they practiced using the tabernacle. They broke it in, right? Imagine you build a new restaurant. I don't know if anybody's in the food business, but the best restaurants, they don't just build it and get the food and then open it up. I remember there was a delicious restaurant in Bell Harbor, Surfside, called Tapas 26. And I remember I was close with the guy who was opening it at the time. And it's an amazing Peruvian kosher restaurant, some of the best sushi in South Florida. And I remember as they were building this gorgeous restaurant, every day for a week, it looked like it wasn't just open, it looked like it was happening. I mean, you walked past that place, it was like you saw tons of people walking, sitting, serving. But if you tried to go in, they wouldn't let you in. And I remember asking them, saying, "What's going on? Are you open or not open?" They said, "No, we don't open until next week." This week, all the people that are eating and sitting and serving are our staff that we're training. We want our waiters to be able to taste all the food. We want our servers to practice serving all the food. We want our chefs to practice cooking all the food. And they had a full week of preparation. And that's when I finally understood this Torah portion. Because at the end of the last week's Torah portion, they had 7 days of preparing for the temple. They had to use it properly. Moses was in charge. Now comes B'yom Shemini, the 8th day. Now it's action time. Now we're open for business. And just to slide to the number 8, the name of the Torah portion, Shemini, is a very important number in Judaism. You may have noticed that what is the sign for infinity? A sideways 8.
Right.
In Judaism, 8 represents infinity. It's God's number. It's God's, infinite number that we have. We see 8 is actually throughout Jewish history. It's used all the time. You have 8. Next week's Torah portion actually says on the 8th day you should give a bris milah, because when do you bring someone into the covenant? On the 8th day. The 8th day represents infinity. There's many sacrifices we brought on the 7-day holiday of Sukkot, but then comes Shemini Atzeret, the 8th day. This is a special day that Hashem wants to connect to us in a more connected way with an infinite connection. We have Shemini is the 8th day of Passover coming up. It's going to be the day that is dedicated to Mashiach. Mashiach is this idea of infinity. It's things that are outside our finite understanding. Hanukkah menorah. The miracle of Hanukkah was 8 days. 8 representing this idea beyond nature. Going beyond nature is number 8. And finally, it says that when Mashiach comes, the harp that they're going to use to play in the Holy Temple is not going to be 7 strings, but it's going to be 8 strings, representing this idea of infinity once again. And God represents infinity. And that's why we can't understand God. We can't fully comprehend everything that God tells us to do because God is infinite and we are finite. But comes along the 8th day, Shemini, and now Moses tells Aaron, it's time to do the business, time to open up, time to start really doing the services as it's the inauguration day of the Holy Temple. And something happens. Number one, Moses tells Aaron to come. He tells him, come, let's get involved. And a little issue happens. The Shekhinah, the holy presence of God, is not coming to rest. And Aaron, right away, what did he feel? He felt very embarrassed. He felt embarrassed. He's like, I know why the Shekhinah is not resting, because I was involved in some dirty stuff. I was involved in the golden calf. It was my idea to try to stall for time many weeks ago. And that's why I maybe am not the right guy. And what does Moses do? Moses does something very beautiful the Torah shares with us. That Moses tells him, basically, it says the Medrash brings down that he recited some verses and the Holy Shekhinah came down. And he's like, no big deal. Come, Aaron, come. And he throws him in, basically, pushes him in to start doing those service. And there's a couple beautiful lessons that we learn over here. Number one, you see the brotherly love between Moses and Aaron. Unfortunately, something that you don't find too often in the previous books of the Torah and stories, right? Cain and Abel, the first 2 brothers, not so nice. They did not get along. Then you see the same thing, Jacob and Esau. They did not get along. They fought with each other. He wanted to kill him. And you see the 12 tribes and their brother Joseph. It was a little bit of a family feud over there. We see this, unfortunately, throughout history, how many times the siblings, the brothers, the other one was down, the other one failed. It's like, Look at you, you're terrible. Why should I help you? Now I will raise up to be even better. And what happens at that moment? Right in this week's Torah portion, Moses says, no, that's not the Jewish way. He says, come, let me help you. I got you. I'll bring down the Shekhinah. Now Moses could have been thinking to himself, oh, now I could be not only Moses, I could be Aaron too. But that's not what he does. He brings down the Shekhinah for him. The Shekhinah is the presence of God himself in the tabernacle, which is supposed to happen on the 8th day. And he brings it down for him, and he basically tells him, you're up. But yet we see that Aaron was a little bit hesitant. And what does he do? He pushes him to get involved by telling him what sacrifices he should bring. And again, this is, I think, a very important message to us in life. How often do we feel, sometimes you wake up in the morning on the left side of the bed. You don't want to get up. You're not interested. You feel down. You feel depressed. You feel sad. You feel, oh, it's not me. How can I do it? We start to procrastinate a little bit. Then we feel down, basically. Moses gives us instructions to never feel down in our life. What does he do? He tells Aaron, he says, come, just do it. Get involved. Jump right into it. It's so often in our life that the things that we push off the most are the most important, but really they're the most difficult to do. And because they're difficult, what do we say? They're difficult, so we push them off. We don't get around to it because it's difficult. But if we would just jump into it, that's how we actually achieve our purpose in this world, specifically through the more challenging things in this world. When we have something that's a bigger challenge and we face it, all of a sudden we have a beautiful moment. I remember I was on a trip to New York a few months ago. I brought a large group of young professionals, and the culmination of the trip is that we were visiting the Ohel of the Rebbe, the resting place of the Rebbe. And someone, I guess, was having a rough morning that morning. And he says, Rabbi, I'm just going to go. We're going to the airport after the Ohel. He's like, I'm just going to go straight to the airport. I'm feeling down. I'm not in a good mood. I'm not, ready to connect. I'm not happy. And I'm just going to skip this experience. He was already there. He's like, I'm not going in. I'm not going to write a letter to the Rebbe. I'm not going to, pray over there. And that's what he said. And I remember telling him, I said, listen, do me a favor. I said, you don't need to pray. You don't need to connect. I said, just take a pen and paper and tell the Rebbe how you're feeling. Write it down. Tell the Rebbe how you're feeling, that you're sorry. You're not in a good mood. You're feeling down, and then leave. Just go in and tell him that. And he says, okay, if that's what you want me to do, I'll do that. It'll take me 2 minutes. And I remember he was way ahead of me. And maybe an hour later I was going myself into the Ohel. And after that hour, I see him walking out. Say, what happened? That was a long 2 minutes. He's like, Yosef, thank you so much. He said, thank you. Thank you for pushing me. Thank you for making sure I got this done. And he said, it's so difficult oftentimes in life. And I was going to run away from it. He says, but you pushed me to do it. And he said, all of a sudden, I'm so glad I did, because after I was able to kind of just push myself into going there, I had the most profound experience. And I think this is true with many things in our life when we don't want to do it. This happens, I know with me, it happens occasionally, maybe even weekly. There's just something that I just don't want to get done, or I'm not in the mood of doing, or I don't have the energy to do, or I'm not feeling up for doing it. But yet, when we push ourselves to do it and just jump right in it, we get it done. The training a kid how to swim, one of the best ways to do it is by throwing the child in. Now, not everybody maybe agrees with this, but at the end of the day, it works. And I think this is a very important lesson that we learned from Moses in this week's Torah portion, what he shows us that he does with Aaron. The Torah portion then goes literally the first few aliyot through the story of the inauguration, the way that they prepared Aaron, the high priest, and his family. And then we see a very tragic story takes place. And that is the death of Nadav and Avihu, the sons of Aaron. And it says that they were intoxicated and they had their firing pans and they went into the tent of meeting, which they were not supposed to. And they were very, they brought a sacrifice and a fire came down and they were killed. And we see that Aaron, there's a whole dramatic little episode over there, and there's a lot of like back and forth on this story of what happened, and it's actually amazing because if you look into Hasidus mysticism, it shows us and tells us how this is actually a beautiful uh, connection point. That Nadav and Avihu were actually very righteous people. That's why God says these are the people that I'm going to be very close to, and that's why next week's or in a few weeks to our portion, Moses is going to tell Aaron that they were better than us. They reached a higher level than us. What happened? Chassidut explains that they had a beautiful expression of their soul, that they were so excited to serve God in the most incredible way. And they came too close, meaning that their soul was experiencing an outer body experience called klot hanefesh, expiration of the soul. And therefore, it was too much for them to handle and they died. And it was a mistake because that's not our purpose in this world. That's not the purpose in our life. It's not to die and for the soul to leave our body, but on the contrary, it's for our soul to remain in the physical body and serve God here. And unfortunately, that's what happened with Nadav and Avihu. There's another Talmudic explanation, which isn't as great, or it doesn't shine such a great light. It says that Nadav and Avihu were walking behind Moses and Aaron, and the Talmud relates that Nadav and Avihu started to talk. And they said, when Nadav turns to Avihu and he says, Avihu, when are these two old men, Moses and Aaron, going to die so we could take their place? And it says that God said, I'll show you who's going to die first. And you heard a beautiful thought on this idea. It says, okay, so Nadav, okay, I get why he died, but why did Avihu die? He didn't do anything wrong. Avihu was just listening to his brother bicker and complain about Moses and Aaron and that they wanted to be the leaders. He was silent. And the answer is that sometimes being silent when someone's doing something wrong is even worse than doing something wrong. Like the famous German theologist who said, right, first they came for the communists, but I was quiet because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the Jew. I was quiet because I wasn't a Jew. They came for the Catholic. I was quiet because I'm not a Catholic. Then they finally came for the Presbyterian, whatever it was, and he said, I'm Presbyterian, but there's no one else to talk for me. And it's a very profound message, I think, today, even more than ever. That in the face of evil, what is our response? We cannot just stay quiet. We can't just ignore it. And I think that if the world knew this message today, the entire world knew it, and together, everyone would be vocal and verbal when someone next to them is saying something wrong. It would be a lot different. But yet we see leaders, celebrities, athletes are just standing there quietly. They're not saying anything. And in a way, that's worse because when you don't say anything, it's like there's a saying in the Ethics of Our Father. It says, "Shtika kehaida." Silence is like admission. When I'm silent, it means I agree with you. I admit to what you're saying, and unfortunately, that's a horrible thing, especially during such crazy times when the whole world, you know, and you look at college campuses. I think it's not even about what some of the professors and some of the leaders are saying on campus, but I think perhaps it's what the other people, what they're not saying. It's sometimes the ones that are quiet that are even worse than the ones that are making a big ruckus. Because the person making a big ruckus, you could say, okay, that's their view, and they're crazy, and they're meshuggah, and they're nuts, and they're this, and they're that, and whatever. The person that is silent, it leaves space for people's imagination to wonder and say, I guess that these smart people who are quiet, they must agree because they're not speaking up. So therefore, Avihu was also punished because he was quiet when his brother made such a statement. He didn't get involved. He didn't say something. So therefore, he too was as guilty as his brother was. The Torah portion then continues, chapter 10. The Torah then says that a person should not drink wine or be intoxicated. Until today, there's laws that Kohanim, priests, there's big debates if they're allowed to drink. If a Kohen is allowed to be drunk, because if Mashiach could come any split second, so that means that if Mashiach could come any split second, that that they're going to have to serve in the temple. And if if we went for some drinks today, I'm a Kohen, then it would be a problem because I would have to serve right away in the temple, according to one opinion. Other opinions say no, it's a little bit far-fetched because by the time we're serving, you have enough time to sober up. And you still have to have time to learn all the laws and things like that. Torah then, in chapter 11, the Torah now goes into a whole nother field. And this is a very, very exciting part of the Torah. And Parshat Shemini, first of all, it's the halfway mark of the entire Torah. The entire Torah is divided in Parshat Shemini, in this chapter, chapter 11, where we start talking about the laws of kosher. All the laws of kosher are in this week's Torah portion. And the laws of kosher are fascinating, of course. And there's a lot of maybe misconceptions about the laws of kosher. And kosher has a lot to discuss. I mean, we could discuss about almost every area of kosher. I mean, there's kosher symbols, right? Just like the OU and the KSA and the OK and the Chaf K and the Moon K and the whatever Lamed K. It goes on. I'll actually tell you that the laws of kosher is a 2 billion, not the laws, the kosher symbol is a $2 billion industry. Okay, so it's a good business. So if you're looking into getting into some new line of work, I mean, you have to hustle it a little bit. But the kosher symbol industry is $2 billion industry. I have some friends that work in the business, and it's fascinating. I mean, they've reached out to me. They said, Yosef, if you know of anyone that does, cold brew, for example, anybody, so send them my way. I'll put a kosher symbol on it. And if I put a kosher symbol on it, it makes it kosher. They make some money because they charge money for the symbol. And he says it's one of the easier things because the ingredients generally already are kosher. So there's some things like that. It's a fascinating field of things that we're not discussing kosher symbols today. You have as well in the laws of kashrut, you have all the laws of slaughtering animals. You have the laws of salting animals. In fact, when you become a rabbi many times, even though it's not necessarily practical, you won't find me really in the butcher shop too often, and or in the shlachtais, the slaughterhouse. But there's many, many laws that you need to learn about slaughtering animals. In fact, the word smicha, which means the rabbinical ordination, meant that you knew how to lean on the cow, check the cow, to make sure it was kosher. That's where smicha came from. So even till today, I remember sitting and learning these laws in great depth of ritual slaughter. They're fascinating, by the way. My brother just became a shochet, a slaughterer, because he lives in Marin County. He has a fascinating job. He is a goat herder. So you have to mow the lawn. So in Marin County, in the Northern California, people have these big hills. It's very hard to mow the lawn. So he sets up a massive fence around the entire perimeter, drops off 100 goats, and the goats mow the lawn literally by eating the grass. But once in a while, some of the goats get older and are already approaching their next big mitzvah that they get to do, and that's feed some the sheep have opportunity to feed a poor family or a family in need or someone celebrating Shabbat. So he learned how to slaughter these animals. And he told me that the hardest part of learning these laws is not the depth of the laws and the details. He said the hardest part for a shochet is sharpening his knife. Just have a very sharp knife. That way there's very little pain caused to the animal because it's immediate death. So it's, fascinating to point out, especially for all the people out there who don't necessarily like the meat and vegetarians and pita and these kind of things. You should just know that kosher slaughter ritual is done in a very sensitive way, as opposed to non-kosher, by the way, which are zapped, but their brain is still functioning and things like that. But back to what we are discussing. By the way, we're not even discussing the laws of milk and meat this week either. It's not really discussing many of those laws, but rather I would say that today is step number 1 to kosher. So today you just go to the kosher store, you find something with a kosher label, and you eat it. But it's a lot deeper than that. There's a lot more than that. What is the first steps of kosher? And there's a lot of rules to identify a kosher animal. What is a kosher animal? What is a kosher fish? What is a kosher bird? What about bugs? What about crawly animals? Are these ones kosher or not? And the answer is like this. The Torah tells us that what makes an animal kosher. By the way, there's some great jokes about kosher. I forgot to start off with. I feel like I need to share a good kosher joke. The Torah this week talks about pig, by the way. Talks about a pig. And how a pig is not kosher. And there's once a story about a rabbi who, being a rabbi for a long time, he just really, really, really wanted to try pig. And, he in his community where he lived, he knew that he could never go and order or buy. Someone might see him or something like that. But this is just something he struggled with since day one. So the rabbi decides, you know what, I'm going to take a day trip and I'm going to go to Aruba. And if I go to Aruba, I'm going to go to a nice restaurant over there and I'll sit in the restaurant in Aruba and I'll order my pig. I'll eat it. I'll get right back on the plane, go back to my hometown just to get it out of his system. He was falling. He couldn't control himself. He just needed to taste what it tastes like. And he goes to Aruba. He flies in. He goes straight to the restaurant in the lobby of one of these beautiful hotels. He sits down. The waiter comes over, welcomes. What could I get you? He says, get me the biggest, the juiciest, the most luxurious pig item that you have. The waitress says, no problem. I'll be right back. He's sitting down when all of a sudden he gets the shock of his life as he hears from the back of the restaurant a voice that says, Rabbi, good to see you. And the president of his synagogue and two board members come walking up to the rabbi and they look at him. He says, Rabbi turns to them. He says, what are you guys doing here in Aruba? He says, oh, one of our businesses, we just had an opportunity for a property and a project that's going to go up, a new hotel that we're investing in. And we're over here. And they start chatting and talking, and the rabbi's getting a little bit embarrassed. And all of a sudden, as they're in the middle of their conversation, the waitress comes with a massive tray, a full pig, with an apple in the mouth of the pig. And the congregants look at the rabbi in complete shock, and the rabbi turns to them. He says, guys, this place is amazing. Aruba, you for sure should invest here. I came to the restaurant just to sit down. I ordered an apple, and look how they bring it. But there's a lot of good jokes about kosher, about everything being under rabbinical supervision. A big myth about kosher is there's no such thing as blessing. There's no such thing as the rabbi just blessing the food, right? I remember back in Marin County growing up, I asked the store once if something was kosher. They're like, no, but we do know a rabbi, and why don't you just bring it to him to bless it? Buy the pizza, the rabbi will bless it. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. It's not about the blessing. It's really about the Jewish law. And the Torah tells us that for a cow or an animal, to be kosher, it needs to chew its cuds and have split hooves. And the Torah lists, and we know that there's many animals, they chew their cuds and have split hooves, they're kosher. Big misconception out there is what animal? Anybody know? People always argue about it. The giraffe. Is a giraffe kosher?
Oh.
The answer is a giraffe is kosher. It splits its hoof. It has split hooves and it chews its cud. But now, why don't you see it in, you go to the Grove or you go to Kosher Central? The answer is, number one, it's endangered. Number two, it's very expensive. Number three, it's not so tasty. There's not a lot of meat on it. So unless you want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a giraffe, it's not common. It never was common. People really never ate giraffe. But giraffe is kosher. I heard about a fascinating conference that took place in New York, in Israel, where they serve rare kosher foods that no one ever really eats. And one of these rare kosher foods that they were serving was, one year they served giraffe, another year bison. They served at this dinner. We're going to learn about creepy crawlers. There's a certain kind of locust, a certain kind of grasshopper that's kosher. They would serve some locust soup over there. And any kind of food that seems far-fetched, maybe some people know, but that are kosher, but you won't find in your local kosher supermarket, they actually will sell. And that's how they served. And it was like a very big dinner, but the point of the dinner was to get into great discussion about it. And the Torah then says something amazing, and this is one of the proofs that God, you ever talk to someone and they might tell you, how do you know God created the world? You don't need to look any further than this week's Torah portion. On page 599, the Torah tells us the answer. The Torah says like this, right? How many animals are out there? How many animals exist in the world? There's tons. There's hundreds of thousands of types of animals. And not only that, there's new species coming out every other day. But the Torah tells us, God says that there's 4 animals that are in the world, that there ever will be in the world, that have one of 4 signs, and they are not kosher. And the Torah then says the pig, the camel, the hare, and the hyrax are 4 animals that have one sign, but not the other sign, and they are not kosher. And I think it's it's a fascinating thing, no scientist or zoologist or animal professional will ever tell you that there's only 4 animals that will only have this little thing on their shoulder in the whole world. They'll say we've discovered for now that 4 animals X, Y, and Z. But God, how does He say that there's 4 animals? How could He be so sure? And the answer is very simple, because He created the world and He knows exactly what's in it. And therefore, the Torah is able to tell us that there's only 4 animals like this. I don't think I mean, I know for sure that there can't be another animal that has one of these signs. But I always, like, when I say this, I was teaching earlier today in the Jewish day school over here, and I brought this up, and some of the kids started Googling, started looking, started searching, wanting to disprove. No one found it. So if you do, let me know if you find another animal like this. If you do, then I'm gonna have to leave this religion, unfortunately. Because how could something be in the Torah not be true? And I just want to tell you that that is the motto of Torah. There's no one thing that's like, okay, this isn't true. This I did. No. This is the way of the Torah. Every single statement in the Torah has to be true, and that's it. End of story. And this is how we know God created the world. The Torah then goes on to tell us, what about fish? What fish are kosher? And we know that there's 2 kinds of fish that are 2 signs on fish that make a fish kosher, and that is fins and scales. And it's interesting. There's a lot of interesting discussions on fish. That what if it has just scales and no fins? And the answer is that it's still kosher. But what if the scales fall off, right? What kind of food would that be? An example? What fish the scales fall off? Anybody? No, it's not gefilte fish, not gefilte. The swordfish. The swordfish, the scales fall off. And I want you to know
More dangerous than any other truck you have.
that there's a lot of discussions about the swordfish. And in some countries, there's customs that they allowed swordfish. But generally, the answer to swordfish is it's not kosher. There's also an interesting discussion about caviar. What kind of caviar is kosher? Ikra, like they say in Russian, only from a kosher fish. But even despite that, you need to be careful not to just buy any caviar that it says it is. You have to actually have a kosher symbol on caviar. Now, the good news is most salmon caviar, for example, the orange one, have kosher symbols. So you should just know that. Now, the caviar business is a fascinating business. You have these caviar fridge with little things of caviar for, a lot of money, especially if you could get some beluga caviar. But unfortunately, beluga caviar is not either kosher. And many of these caviars are not kosher. Now, what happens if you find you catch a shark and you open the shark, and in the shark you find the salmon? Is that kosher? The answer is yes. But what if you catch a salmon and inside the salmon you find the catfish? Catfish doesn't have fins and scales, so the catfish is not. It doesn't now become kosher, which is just the interesting law that Jewish law brings down when it comes to fish and some of the interesting laws about it. But these are the laws of fish. Now, there's an interesting deeper level when it comes to fish as well. What's the concept behind these 2 signs? And by the way, I want you to know that there's a spiritual element to all laws of kosher. Now, when we get into the reasoning of kosher, There's a lot of misconceptions, right? What do people say? Why do we keep kosher? Anybody know what's the reason? Anybody know? Anybody? What's the reason for kosher? Amy, are you Googling it? Respect. I see you wrote respect.
It's commanded in the Torah.
Okay, it's commanded in the Torah. That's exactly right. Very good. But there's actually another I mean, Wendy, that's correct. The answer of kosher is
Well, there's another level to it, right? I
no,
understand.
is actually what you said, because the Torah says keep kosher. It is
Mhm.
actually a chok. You know, I meet people, they say kosher, that's for health reasons, right? I said, well, if that was the case, most rabbis would look more like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And most kosher people would look a little stronger. But it's nothing to do with that. The laws of kosher have nothing to do with with health, really. Although there are health benefits to some kosher things. For example, we don't eat fish and meat together. That's why you'll notice 2 forks when you go to some of these meals on Friday night. We're not supposed to, and that actually is brought down as a health reason. It's fully for health.
For
Now,
holiness, all right?
what?
For holiness, for reaching holiness, that God wants us to reach.
Yeah, listen, there's an idea of holiness to it. It says that we are what we eat, so you got to be careful with what we put. There's many reasons that are given. By the way, some of the reasons have to do with intermarriage, believe it or not. It says that, where are you hanging out? If you're eating, if you're not careful about kosher, so then you're eating in non-kosher places, you're hanging out with non-kosher places, and it causes intermarriage. It says that baked items, there's a whole section of Jewish law about baked items. It needs to be baked by a Jew. What's the answer? What's the reason? And then the code of Jewish law, it says chasnus, because you're worried about intermarriage. And the question is, what? You're worried about intermarriage? What does that have to do with going eating baked foods that wasn't baked by a Jew? And the answer is very simply, it used to be you'd hang out in the bakery, you get to know the baker, and then you like his daughter, and then you want to marry the daughter of the baker, and she's not Jewish, she's not a Jewish baker. And the truth is, it's also about where you're hanging out. On that same trip to New York I was telling you about earlier, when I brought a bunch of people, someone came over to me who came on the trip, who I pushed to come on the trip. He's a nice Jewish boy, not necessarily so involved in everything, and he tells me, I have to thank you because I've never met a Jewish girl that I was dating before, but I met someone here that I really liked, that I was dating. And I said, of course you did. You're here, you're hanging out amongst a lot of Jewish people. That's what's going to happen. You're going to find a nice Jewish girl, as opposed to if you're hanging out in other places, then that's not what's going to happen. So there is this idea of being careful with breaking bread as well, around Jewish, people. But the reason is because God commands us to keep kosher, and therefore we eat kosher. End of story. Although there are some deeper ideas, and the deeper ideas that I mean are like, it says, what's this concept of being swallowing and eating the food, regurgitating? Is you careful with what you put into yourself. You don't just eat something without thinking, or you don't just do something without thinking about it. What's the concept behind fins and scales? It says fins help us go against the current, and the scales protect us. This is the same thing that a Jew needs to remember in their own lives. I need to always have my scales to protect me from things around me. I can't be influenced by everything around me. And the fins represent this idea as well of being able to swim against the current, even though everyone around me might be doing something. I don't need to stick with what everyone's doing. I could push past them. This is one of the deeper meanings behind it. And it's just a couple examples of it. But then comes the interesting one, and that is birds. What makes a bird kosher or not kosher? And that is no signs. I was teaching this morning with the students, and I said, "What makes a bird kosher?" And one of the kids said, "It has to have beaks and wings." A bird has to have beaks and wings. I'm like, that's good, spins and scales, split hooves, beaks and wings. I said, no, it's nothing to do with the beaks or the wings of the bird, but rather the Torah lists us 24 birds that we are not allowed to eat. And those 24 birds are the ones that we can't eat. Every other bird, that if it's not on the list, you could. Yeah, you go to Publix and you can buy quail eggs because quail is kosher. It's not on the list. Now, there's a big argument about a lot of the birds that are on the list as well. While I was teaching, I actually called a friend of mine, and his last name is Horowitz, and he comes from a rabbi named the Shalah HaKadosh. The Shalah was Rabbi Horowitz a few hundred years ago, and he said that one of these birds is actually a turkey.
Mhm.
And we can't eat turkeys. It wasn't discovered, but this is a turkey, and anybody that you'll meet from his family origin won't eat turkey until this day. Do not
Mhm.
go to their house for Thanksgiving. It will be a very big letdown. They eat brisket instead. But anyways, so there's still people that have different opinions based on these kind of birds that they have. And of course, there's also this idea of you are what you eat, and you want to only have good traits. You only want to have a good trait of the animals that that you're eating. So, for example, one of the birds is called a chasida, the kind one. Why was it kind? It says because it shares its food with its friends. The question is, why is that considered kind if it shares its food with its friends? I mean, that's a great trait, and the answer is that it only shares its food with its friends. It doesn't, if you are nice to the people that you love, but you're not nice to the other people, that's not called being kind. That's called doing what you do. You're respectful to your best friend. Of course, I share my things with my best friend, but it's not about that. It's about being able to share with the people that you maybe don't love, the people that maybe you're not so close with. That's real kindness. So therefore, it's not a good trait. If you watch Rabbi Scheiner's video, he spoke about the raya bird with a great vision. What's wrong with a great vision? It says that it used to see a carcass from Babylon to Jerusalem. What did it see? It saw that it had a good vision, but the vision that was used was for finding negativity. So it's not a good trait as well. And I think that this is in general a very important idea when it comes to kosher. When we don't keep kosher, what does it cause? Timtum halev. Just like, you go to the doctor and all of a sudden you have some clogged arteries, or you have something, you know, negative about you, or you have something stuffed, right? It's because you're eating something that's maybe not so healthy, a little too much fat, a little bit too much red meat, whatever it is. So it says that the same thing with the food that we eat oftentimes in the spiritual sense also has that effect. It says someone who doesn't eat kosher food, if we don't eat kosher food, it actually affects the way that we feel godliness. And it's called timtum alev, where the heart gets stuffed up and we don't feel godliness. We don't feel Hashem. And that's a very big issue. We need to always make sure that we have a feeling and we're able to feel God. And by keeping kosher, that helps you feel God. I meet people all the time. Like, I don't feel godliness. I don't feel spirituality. I don't feel connected. And the question is, well, what are you doing in your physical life that might be causing that? And kosher actually has that effect. And therefore, very important to refrain from it. And the Torah then goes on about creepy crawly insects, and it lists many different bugs that you actually get a sin for eating each one of these different bugs. By the way, we check our lettuce for bugs because it's a sin to eat a bug, even if it's a creepy, crawly, small little animal. You're not allowed to eat it. I'll never forget when I was a young boy, we had a competition between a few friends who could come up with a scenario where someone is doing the most sins at once. We had to be very creative in knowing the laws of the Torah to know the sins. And then we had a mitzvah contest also, how many mitzvahs you could do at one physical time, right? So if I would ask you, think of a scenario of someone doing the most sins at once. So I remember writing, on Yom Kippur, someone was eating a cheeseburger while they were shooting someone in a stolen car, and they were, those are the scenarios. But there's one kid who won, and I'll never forget. He listed every single non-kosher bug that you get a separate prohibition for eating, and therefore he had like this bug sandwich, so to speak, that the whole sandwich that the person bit into at one time was like 20 something sins that he was doing, because each one is a sin. But there are locusts that are kosher, like we see in this Torah portion as well. And then we learn about the contamination of these animals and the like. But I just want to conclude with when talking about kosher, sometimes it could be a very big jump. It could be like a very we learn about kosher, maybe I feel guilty now, maybe I'm not going to eat this now, maybe I'm not going to drink this now, maybe I'm not going to do this now. And sometimes it sounds very heavy duty. And I think that the mindset that we need to have when it comes to kosher is not just an all or nothing, but really one step in the right direction, or refraining from one thing. I'll tell you, I had a funny phone call with someone yesterday. One of my teenagers who went through our teen program 7 years ago. I've stayed in touch with him, and he's now working as he works for rappers. Okay, so he helps them out. He gets them what they need, and he's there when he's in there in the rapping scene. And he got a new gig with a very famous rapper named Kanye West. And he calls me and he says, "Rabbi, I feel guilty. I feel a little bad. What do I do?" This guy was very anti-Semitic, posting all different terrible things about the Jews and gas and the Holocaust. And I told him, I said, "Listen, you're there not because you should feel bad about it, but you're there because maybe you could have an impact. We believe everywhere we are in life, maybe you could have an impact. Maybe you could show, no, Jewish people are very nice. Let me tell you, let me educate you, let me be there." He says, "Oh, thank you so much. That's why I called you. That's why I called you, because, you're giving me the positive outlook." And then he says, "I have a couple more questions." He said, "I saw in the news yesterday about 5 red cows they found in Texas that they're shipping to Israel." He said, "What's that about?" And I explained to him there's something called the red heifer. We read it last week, and there was actually 5 cows that they thought maybe fell into the category, and they shipped them there. I even told him that my uncle in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, was alerted about a red cow born in Cabo, and he got excited and called in the professionals, because it says when Mashiach comes, we're going to find the 10th cow. So it's a very exciting thing to find the red heifer. And he said, but they found some white hair on it, and it wasn't kosher. I said, that might happen now as well. And then he finally asked me, what's the idea behind karbanot sacrifices? And I told him, I want you to know that the message behind sacrifices is as follows. Sacrifices, we don't do animal sacrifices today, but sacrifices, the message is everlasting. And that is, are we sacrificing ourselves for Hashem? Are we sacrificing? What sacrifice am I doing in my day-to-day life? It might be a tiny little thing, and I'm sacrificing 5 minutes to pray, or whatever it might be. What am I sacrificing to serve God? And I said that this is the message. This is really what the message of the sacrifices is. I said, what are you sacrificing? And all of a sudden he tells me, Rabbi, I don't know. I am so bad. He says, I love pork. He says, I can't not eat my pork. And I love it. And the pulled beef, pulled pork sandwiches, whatever he's going in. And I said, excellent. I'm glad you shared that with me. He said, why? I said, because tonight, when you refrain from it, you have now brought a sacrifice to God. And he says, what do you mean? I said, are you able to not eat it tonight? He says, yeah, of course. For you, if that's what you tell me to do, I'll do. I said, good. And all of a sudden, I said, well, guess what? At that moment, you're bringing a sacrifice to God. And I think that when we learn the laws of kosher, it can be overwhelming. Sometimes a person's like, oh, no more shellfish. It could be it's a big jump for some people. And I think it's about taking that one thing in the area of kosher, that one law, that one, not something that I'm not already doing, already not doing, but something that maybe I'm struggle with, and say, this is going to be my sacrifice in kosher. I'm not telling you have to have 2 sinks and get 2 sets of dishes and do everything tomorrow. No. Take one step at a time, make that sacrifice, and come a step closer to keeping kosher. I want to wish everyone a beautiful rest of your day, and hope to see you all in the near future. For all the men out there on the class today, we have a men's event tonight at the Wisdom on Worth at 5:30 p.m. Feel free to join us, and of course, many other events throughout the week. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah, thank you.
Be well.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Nice day.
Bye.
See you late June.
Oh, wow. Where are you now?
I'm in Hungary, Budapest.
No way. You're in Budapest right now?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Well, we spent you don't think that if I would be in Palm Beach, I'm not going to attend every Saturday. I would be a member a long time. But my green card is in a process, so hopefully by the end of the year, I will be up in Massachusetts. And then, that's like a green card program. And the year after, I will be a full-time
Well, it's
member.
nice to know people are zooming on from Hungary to study. Scott, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you, Rabbi?
Thank God. It's nice to see you. It's been a while.
Nice to see you too. That was a nice class today.
Thank you. I hope you're going to join us again in Palm Beach soon.
I'd love to. It's so far it's not working out.
Okay.
I wish it were.
Before you know it.
I'd love to be down there. Not just because it's colder up here, but I miss you guys. I miss the synagogue.
All right.
Yeah.
Miss you too, and we're
Me
happy to
too.
be able to see you.
Thank you for missing me too.
All right. Be well.